Welcome, everyone. For those who I haven't met, my name's Alicia. I'm an advanced sports dietitian, and alongside Lauren Marino, we run the Academy. So, the Academy is a place for dietitians, nutritionists to come together and have a whole lot of community. And also, we adore chatting big topics. And we noticed some big questions coming through our community chat over the last few months around supplements, knowing when to test, what's safe, what's not. So we thought we'd take this opportunity and actually look at how do we ensure supplement safety for our athletes and our clients, but also how do we ensure we're going into those conversations with confidence. So I know that this can be quite a confusing topic, even for those who are accredited sports dietitians. So I'm going to hopefully bring it down to a point where everyone feels confident leaving this session. There may still be some questions by the end, and if there is, more than happy to chat through it. So why don't we start, first of all, by kind of just working through what a supplement actually is. And when you're looking at a supplement, you're looking at something that's consumed additional to their diet, right? So it's an oral intake when we're considering a sports supplement. And it can include anything from protein powders, from sports drink, electrolytes, creatine, caffeine. There's lots of different things that would be considered a supplement. And some of them are individual single ingredient supplements, and some of them are mixed ingredients, so multiple ingredient supplements. So lots of different things in this category. And as a result, lots of different areas of risk when we're considering what a supplement is. The other thing that's really important to note is we've also got the category of ergogenic aids. So ergogenic aids are basically any strategy, consumption or otherwise, that are there to improve performance, recovery in the athlete. So basically a performance aid is the definition there. And they can be the crossover in supplements, where it might be things like creatine, caffeine, beta-alanine, all those types of things, alongside things like ice bars or like what else? Altitude tents, those types of things that you might use for performance. So ergogenic aids is a really broad umbrella term, and within that there are the supplement category. So the risk level varies, as I mentioned, and so let's work through that because that's a really important piece. Now, before I go through that, it's really important, I guess, to premise and start with that in our role working with athletes and clients, we actually don't get the last say, and it's not our decision whether someone takes something. Our role is in improving someone's understanding, empowering them to make the right decision for them, then the safest decision for them, but also allowing them to feel confident in doing so. Because the decision to take a supplement should always come down to the individual that's taking it, because that is where the risk lies. And that's who is going to get the blame if anything happens to come back as a positive drug test, for example. And so our role isn't to prescribe. Our role is actually to empower and support the decision, or support the facilitation of that decision, if it is right for that client. But stepping them through that is going to be a big part of what we chat about today. So let's look at the risk. I feel like often when I'm having conversations with athletes, I'm more worried and scared than they are about supplements. So I think just noting that is a really important thing. I think with such a big influx of supplements, it's become really normalized in culture to take supplements, and with so doing has reduced the perceived risk. However, when you look at research around supplements and random tests that have been done, it's a really high percentage of supplements on the market that do have banned substances in them, or have inaccurate amounts compared to the label, or have ingredients in them that actually weren't on the label either. So there's a really big Wild West cowboy kind of feel to the supplement industry, because it isn't actually tightly regulated, both in Australia but also globally. And as you know, the market is very small in that way, where we are accessing supplements from all around the world very readily now, but whether it be online but also at different shops and through different avenues. So just be really aware that the risk level is high. Some studies will show anywhere from like the 1 in 10 as tainted, but all the way up, depending on what they're looking at, to a really high number around that 50%. So depends where they get them from, depends where the testing was done, depends what country, but just keep in mind that this is part of that risk, right? And when I'm explaining that to an athlete, I really like to put the picture in place of just how little it takes to come back with a positive test. And that tends to be able to work quite well in terms of not wanting them to fear it in a way of, being frozen in fear, but really being aware of the risk and importance of making the best decision for them in their career. So when we're looking at the concentrations that need to come back as a positive test, it is such a low concentration. The example I often give, if you've got 1 teaspoon of banned substance and you mix that into a 50-meter swimming pool, the concentration of that whole swimming pool with that banned substance is enough for that to come back as a positive test. So say that amount and that concentration comes back in their urine or their blood sample, that would become a positive drug test just from that really small amount in that really big amount of water. So what we want to do is make sure that we're kind of getting them aware of how this might happen. Sometimes it's actually accidental on the supplement company's behalf where they're packaging in a facility alongside other supplements that might actually be banned. So they're not doing anything wrong because it's not wrong to sell a banned substance in some products. And so they might be using a banned substance with another product and they haven't rinsed off the equipment properly, or it's airborne, or it's sitting on different buttons. The transfer of this is such a small amount just to be really, really aware of. So it can be accidental. The other piece to this is the not so accidental stuff. So it has been noted that some supplement companies will actually put a banned substance in at the start of their supplement career or product to create really positive results, positive word of mouth, and then they might even remove that banned substance. So not so accidental. The other piece to this is when they're looking at supplements, often they will find that what is actually placed in the ingredients list is actually not what's in the product. Again, really poorly regulated. Or the amount of claimed product in the supplement isn't actually reflective of what's in it compared to the label. And that percentage of change, I'll have to link this article to the recording for you, is mind-blowing. It's actually quite horrific. So this type of stuff is stuff that we know, but how we communicate that to the athlete and the client, whoever you might be seeing, is the most important part. So they understand and appreciate the risk that they need to consider, but also the importance of making the decision that is right for them and their career and protects them in terms of their availability, but also their mental health in going through something like this so stressful. So that's probably the big thing. The other risks, I guess, is the lack of evidence in most supplements and the risk of taking something for an absolute useless amount of money, but also useless amount of risk as well, and the side effects that can happen as well. You might have seen in the news around vitamin B12 toxicity and those types of things to consider. So this is something that I think is really important in our part to be aware of, to be covering things that are in vogue at the moment in the news, going viral, to make sure that we're aware of the risk before they come up, but also to be really fast in reaction if we do notice something that's concerning from an athlete of ours or an athlete population that might be turning towards something. So this brings me to how do we reduce the risk and how do we ensure that the decision from the client is as easy as possible. And honestly, if anyone has a good idea of how to make this really simple, please shoot it through, because I still feel like getting an athlete to make a decision and a purchase that's safe is still really convoluted and quite technical. Because in, say, even a product that is batch tested, maybe only a part of that product range is tested, and it might be a specific URL. And then, there's just so many things that you need to direct them to. And even in the batch testing arena, they've got different badges for different things. And I feel like the whole space is overcomplicated and makes that decision really hard. So batch testing, to put it simply, is where words have gone, a supplement company sends a sample of their product to a third party, totally independent third party, not tied to that supplement company at all. What that third party then does is tests for around 200 to 300 of the most common banned substances. And if there is none present in that supplement, they will then be able to put the stamp of approval in terms of third-party batch testing on. And that stamp may look like a HASTA logo, it might be NSF that they use, it might be Informed Sport, all those types of things. And what that does is it doesn't give a 100% guarantee that that isn't going to cause an inadvertent doping, but it does reduce the risk significantly for that athlete. The other piece to this, to overcomplicate it, is there's different types of informed sport, informed choice, informed protein now, which does overcomplicate it. And so there's other ways of batch testing where the third-party batch testing that we're after is that every batch is tested and the logo goes on. And that's Informed Sport and HASTA as an example. And the other option is something like Informed Choice, where because it costs the supplement company money to get it batch tested, they might go, you know what, I just want the Informed Choice logo, and that will ensure that it's at least looking good on my end, but also only reduce risk, not low risk for the athlete. And what that is that it's not every batch that gets tested, it's an infrequent amount of batches that get tested. So if you see the Informed Choice logo, that's green, that is a better option than not, but also not as low risk as an Informed Sport logo. See what I'm saying? It's freaking complex and really confusing even for the sports dietitian. So it just means that you're seeing that on may not have actually been tested in terms of that batch, but at some point in the latest, like probably recent future, one of those products very similar to that has been tested and come back clean. So just so you're aware, there's different versions, which really adds up. So who needs batch testing is probably the next thing I wanted to cover. I often go through a pathway approach, and let's start with, say, your active individual that just wants to take a protein powder, for an example. They don't need to have a batch tested option. They're not going through WADA or ASADA in terms of drug testing, and it's not essential. However, I do find that the habit of choosing batch tested and also the reduced risk of not having some dangerous substances in the supplement is a really good practice to just educate them on, but also recommend in terms of a great option in terms of reducing risk. When you get, say, an emerging athlete or a development athlete that might be underage or they might be moving through the pathway, I really do turn to recommending only batch-tested supplements. There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, habit building. If you build a habit from the start that is, I will only take supplements that are batch tested, and I know how to do that, I know which supplement brands to choose, and I know what to look for, then it's much easier to do that than turn someone around once they're WADA or ASADA tested. The other piece to this is obviously once someone is elite or professional, they are open to testing and need 110% all supplements to be batch tested. Let me cover that all though in a second, because that's also another little thing that you need to be aware of. So when I say all supplements need to be batch tested, this again adds a little curveball to the different rules and can also be really confusing for you as a practitioner. Now, there's a thing called, which you might be aware, OST-R and OST-L on medications and supplements. Think chemist, right? You go into a pharmacy and you want to buy some herbals or some vitamins, minerals, those types of things. Do they need to be batch tested? And when you're looking at these things, OST-R, you can think of that R as registered, is TGA assessed and approved in terms of efficacy, safety, and ingredients. So an OST-R medication or supplement is not needing to be batch tested in that way. So for example, iron is OST-R. And so iron as a supplement, as a single ingredient supplement, may I add, doesn't need to be tested because it's already been assessed and reviewed via the TGA for safety, efficacy, and ingredients. Now, then you move to something like OST-L, and this is where you might find magnesium, multivitamins, probiotics, lots and lots of things. So you can see how it gets really confusing for you as a practitioner, but also for your athlete or your clients as well. Add to this, just because it's OST-R registered doesn't mean it's an approved supplement in terms of WADA or ASADA testing. So medications are really important to know how to help your athlete or your client check for, because you as the practitioner might know the needs of an athlete and in that WADA or ASADA testing range, but the practitioner that they're working with, maybe a GP, may not. And so having these conversations that aren't just about nutrition supplements, but also around medication safety are really important. And so when you're looking at, say, is something safe? we're looking at using other tools like Global Draw, oh gosh, the names escape me. Sports Integrity app is also a really good one. So Global Draw is somewhere I live. Sports Integrity app is also excellent, and they help you decide what is safe in season, out of season, what decision they can make in terms of safety or whether it's legal or not, around medications and not just supplements. It can also help with batch testing, checking as well. So highly recommend having those apps on your phone and coaching your clients and your athletes through that decision making. Because when you're looking at where the decision lies, as I said at the start, it's not actually our decision whether an athlete takes something. That is the athlete's decision because that's where the risk and responsibility will continue to lie. If an athlete gets tested positive for doping, rightly or wrongly, that will not come down to the person that gave them that supplement. It will come down to the athlete. So you as the practitioner don't have the right to prescribe and persist on giving something someone that that hasn't consented. So when you're making that decision, I think that's a really important way to think of it is, okay, well, if my role isn't in prescription and telling someone what to do, how can I ensure that I coach them in that behavior and that decision? And it's exactly what we do as practitioners anyway, right? But I think it does make sure that we don't turn into that prescription, highly risky setting of saying you need to have this or this is what you have to have. So say an athlete approaches you and is wanting to know whether they should take creatine. You can absolutely say, wow, the evidence is really strong for your sport. It is amazing. It's going to help with this and this. It's definitely something you should consider. Can I now talk you through what that actually means, what you might see, what you need to think about, and how to then choose something safely and take it safely so it's the right amount, but also the right type and a tested safe amount. So that you're then guiding them through that decision, but also always keeping them a part of the conversation to say no at any point that they're wanting to as well. And also always reiterating that it is absolutely their choice and their decision. You're just empowering them to make an educated decision and one that they feel comfortable and confident in terms of like their career, their availability, and what feels right for them. And if an athlete, I've got a few, say that they're not interested in a supplement, we need to respect that. We can absolutely continue to say, have you thought about this? Or it might be great to revisit this, but it is always the decision of the athlete whether they want to take that supplement or not and weigh up those risks versus rewards. So when we're looking at the decision, there's a couple of ways to do it. Sometimes a top-down approach in terms of is it safe is a really good place to start. However, working with athletes, I often find that that's not necessarily the first place they go. And so sometimes we can start with, do you actually need it? Like, is this what you need right now? Is there evidence that it actually works for what you're wanting it for? Is it safe? Can then come after that, but also who's making the decision? Where's that going to be? How's that decision going to be made? And how are we going to record that and ensure that your safety is paramount? Because there's no point taking a supplement that's so high risk that they then get caught doping and are out of the sport for a fairly long amount of time for some instances. So just something to consider, I guess, in that decision making of talking them through that decision tree. There's some amazing ones online, but we'll also share the one that we often share with our athletes. So I can put that into the email with the recording, but also just really reiterating that your role isn't to tell someone what to take. It's to actually empower them to make the right decision for them and their safety. So I guess with the supplement side of things, that's that. The one thing that I wanted to cover as well, though, is the blurry line between food and supplemental food and supplements. And supplemental food is where we start to see what's called PFFs or protein fortified foods, for an example. But more and more, we're getting supplements in food anyway. So I think protein fortified food is just one example. So this comes down to your professional opinion and also your ability to do some risk mitigation strategies in terms of due diligence, asking questions, and ensuring you're then talking with the athlete about what they think is the best possible path. So PFFs are things like protein fortified foods like Carmen's protein bars, for example, Up and Go Energize, for an example, Bliss balls in a cafe that might have protein powder in them, Boost smoothies with protein powder. There's lots of different examples of PFFs. protein wheat bix. I don't know if that's still a thing. Did that stick? I feel like that's gone now. But anyway, that was a thing for a while. So it's a really big range. Now, a few years ago, the AIS actually investigated the safety of PFFs and to work through whether do we need to look at testing for this, or is this something that we can recommend to our athletes at a very low risk? And looking at the food supply in Australia and also the safety of food provision and creation, it was deemed that even though sometimes it was really hard to get information from these companies, the way that these were made and also with the ingredients that are in their diverse range, it's a very low risk option that doesn't need batch testing. So you can still have these conversations with the athletes where there's really no guarantee with anything that we do, but they're considered on that lower risk scale. Sorry, wow, words. And often what they're doing to protein fortify is not actually commercial protein powder, it's food-based supplementation ingredients. So very different to, say, a protein bar that's made in a company like True Protein or BSC, where they're using their protein powder in their protein bar to create a high protein food option. That's different to Carmen's putting a soy protein from the food supply into the bar to increase the protein content. So I hope that makes sense. Something like Rockabilly's is another example here where they're using food-based ingredients and not using a supplement to create a high protein option. So that is the other blurry line. There's just so many things now that I feel are big questions for us as practitioners. But also, if you always come back to, like, is this actually needed? Is it safe? Is there evidence? Then you can help make a really great decision that's right, but also help someone make a better decision if you see something that is high risk. Because the more social media is around and the creation of opportunities in terms of sponsorships and money for emerging athletes or professional athletes, I think we've got to be really, really fast and really, really on top of what kind of reach outs they're going to be. The other piece to this is if they see others taking a certain supplement, there's going to be an assumption that it must be safe, or others are doing it, so it must be fine, or this athlete that I really aspire to be or look up to is taking it, or not even taking it, just marketing it. I can't wait to try it. So really navigating that piece is really important, just as much as, the sciencey bit of the performance nutrition. It's very, very tricky. But what you want to do is kind of step them through what your process is so that you're teaching them how to make a better decision, not just telling them what to do. So some examples that you might do if someone reaches out is like, oh my gosh, that's such a good question. Let's look together. And you might jump on, share screen, show them how you might check, show your processes, or little sentences like, oh my gosh, that is something that I come across all the time. Can I show you the tools that I use to make a decision? And say it's a product that you've never come across. Say it's a product in that blurry line where you're not sure whether it will need batch testing or not. The process can look different. It can be a call to the manufacturer or the company to work through what ingredients do you use? Where do you source those ingredients? Can you tell me more about where it's packaged, what it's packaged with? And from there, you can share that evidence and share that story with the athlete or the client to navigate your own opinions, I guess, on the risk to then help them make a decision that is right for them and where they feel that they're most comfortable. And I just realized the time and I have spoken for long enough. So I am more than happy to chat and work through any questions that you might have. Mm, awesome. Okay, I've just got one come through. Where do things like herbals come into this? Okay, herbal supplements. Fuzzy. Herbal supplements, I would say, oh, yes, I'm welcome. Herbal supplements, I would say, come into the really blurry category. And something that you need to consider in terms of evidence and risk and if they really need it. If it comes down to they really need it, and there's high evidence, then I think you can make another decision that's maybe different to what I'm about to talk through. But most of the time with herbals, the evidence isn't strong enough to enable the risk that would be from herbals. It's very rare that herbal supplements, I'm talking things like echinacea, ashwagandha, are batch tested. Very rare. I've hardly seen it. I don't think I've seen it before. And also considering that, there's also now the blood passport. So it's not just a matter of there's a certain amount of this in your system, then it is a positive test. The blood passport actually gets normative data for the individual levels of, say, testosterone as an example. And if it notices an abnormal peak in that testosterone, it might still sit in the normal window, but it actually is considered a doping risk because of the change that's happened over time. So if, say, that herbal is something that increases testosterone, for example, I would say that's a really high risk that the athlete needs to be aware of, and definitely something that I wouldn't consider navigating or even recommending. Question from Brooke. Is there a database of current batch tested products to draw from? Or the market moving too fast? The market is moving very fast, but I would say the batch testing part of the market is moving slow enough to keep on top of this. There's a few ways. If you want a one-stop shop for your client or for yourself to just buy batch tested options, there's an incredible website that is Australia-based called batchtested.com.au. And you pay a little bit extra for the product, but it is so easy in terms of user experience because everything on that website is batch tested. And so you can send an athlete there and go, you need this and this, and you know they're going to facilitate it really well and they'll get the right option. The other piece to this is checking batches can take looking at the label, but also not assuming that just because it's on the label, it's been batch tested. You can look at this on the Informed Sport website and look for brands and options. You can search for, say, creatine if you're looking for a batch tested creatine, or you can look for the brand and also the batch number to see if it's been tested as well. So you can kind of back check, but also forward check for recommendations. Australia-wise, HASTA is a really common third party that's used. America is more NSF, but definitely in the UK and also Australia, Informed Sport is the big one. So their websites will have what's been tested and what brands and what products, and the date and the batch number that you can check. That's definitely the main way that I do it. Hopefully that helps, Brooke. Awesome. Any other questions? Amazing. Well, with that, I might start to collate some things that I've promised you over this time. I'll send those through. I think it was some studies around the horrifying data of supplements and how risky they are and how falsified the information is. But also, I think it was the decision tree that you can share and you can build with your athletes as well. Because, yeah, I think navigating that and kind of putting a stop to different thought processes early on is really important, particularly when it comes to supplements without any evidence, but also supplements with multi-ingredients that are just so high risk that you really just want to put a stamp to it in terms of considering something maybe else that they could be doing, whether that's food-based or another safer supplement. So I hope this has been informative, guys. I know sometimes it can feel really complex and confusing. So I always talk about this in a way of just opening questions, but also empathizing with the athletes that are meant to understand all this as well. And I think that means that the way that we translate information can be much simpler and empathetic to what we're trying to achieve for the people that we're working with. So thank you so much, everyone. Oh, thank you so much, Kylie. That's beautiful feedback. Thank you so much for joining, guys. I hope you have a lovely afternoon, and thank you so much for joining, whether you're live or on the recording. Bye, team.